Hello there. Welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour Amonkhet. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe with Ian Duke. We know you're ready. The players are ready too. It's time for round two, where we've got a really nice matchup. Kenji Tsumura versus Shota Yasooka, two Hall of Famers from Japan. Let's sit down for round two here from Pro Tour Amonkhet. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Amonkhet. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with R&D insider Ian Duke. And we're ready for round two coverage here. Of course, we're still in the booster draft portion of the tournament. We'll be covering standard a little bit later today. But for now, oh boy, do we have a nice matchup. We have got two Hall of Famers, both from Japan. That's Shota Yasooka from Team Musashi. On the other side of the table, we're going old school, Kenji Tsumura from Team Last Samurai. And we are in for a treat here, Ian, as these are two of the game's elite players. We get to watch them battle here at Amonkhet Booster Draft. Now, what are we seeing here from a archetype perspective? I see two mountains here from Tsumura, and not shocked, blue-black in the hands of Shota.
Yeah, so starting from Kenji's side here, it looks like he has an almost mono red deck with just a touch of black there. And to some extent, this is like the holy grail that players are looking for this weekend. We've heard a lot of players and teams talking about how powerful red is, and that being kind of the default strategy that you want to go for these hyper-fast red aggressive decks. Cards like Bloodlust and Sight are just really turbocharging your strategy there. On the other side of the table, we have Shota Yasooka playing blue and black, a much less preferred color combination, at least from the players that I've talked to so far here this weekend. This is more of a controlling deck. It often has cycling reward cards, or just plays more cycling cards in general to give you more options as the game goes along. And so the dynamic of this matchup is very much Kenji being this hyper-fast aggressive deck, and Shota trying to dig in his heels, defend himself, and win a longer game here.
You can see that Shota played a Splendid Agony, and he killed 1.5 creatures, I'll call it, on the other side of the battlefield there from Kenji Tsumura. Kenji started off, well, by casting a decent number of spells, but ultimately a little bit slowly here. Nimbleblade Kenra, you know, not the premium 2-drop in the set here, even from the, well, looking nearly mono-red deck here from Kenji Tsumura. And Shota, having killed a Bloodlust Inciter and putting a counter on the other, really only had one target there for his Vizier of Many Faces. But, oh boy, this is the type of card that the red deck does not want to see. This is a Cartouche of Ambition from Shota Yasooka. He's playing it on his Vizier and getting in there. Lifelink, able to recoup a lot of the losses that the red deck can inflict in the early game. And one of the interesting things about this format in particular, Ian, is that we've seen the players favoring very aggressive decks to the extent that they're willing to trade cards for damage almost straight up. You know, a lot of the more aggressive decks, typically in Limited, tend to play aggressive creatures, which are recurring sources of damage, but we've seen Cartouche of Zeal, for example, is a card that has a generally more temporary effect on the battlefield, getting played in multiples in these type of decks. And when you do that, when you trade cards from your hand for just damage from your opponent, and they can recoup some of that damage through a card like Cartouche of Ambition, you can really set the aggressive player back if they can't deal with the creature.
Absolutely, Marshall. That's kind of the fundamental crux of this aggro versus control matchup in this format, and really in Magic in general, is that, you know, the aggressive decks are basically throwing away cards to get an extra damage and hoping to end the game before it matters that they're down so many cards. And that is why the control decks do win the later games, because if they're able to defend themselves, they're just up all that extra virtual card advantage, we call it, because they're not throwing away their cards. They're investing their cards into more powerful effects that are longer lasting on the game state.
That's right, and we've seen this here from Kenji in the early stages. Already two cards that fit into that category you just mentioned, the Consuming Fervor there. Again, he's down a card. he has not produced an additional mana source, but he's enabled that Nimbleblade Kenra attacks that it didn't have prior. The other card is that Bloodlust Insider, which we see sitting in the graveyard for Tsumura in this case, but that's another card that doesn't have a big impact on its own, but can enable more damage quicker than you'd normally be able to get in. So the real question here is, can Shota, we call it kind of turn the corner on this game, right? Can he get to the point where he's stable enough to punish Kenji for using the more short-term cards?
And I think a big part of that dynamic of turning the corner, as you said, Marshall, is that Cartouche of Ambition that we saw earlier in the game. Now, this is a fairly unassuming card, I think, from most players' perspectives. But it can really add up a lot of value, and it's really one of the key cards that helps the defensive black decks stabilize against the aggression here. It's just a little bit of value here, a little bit of value there, a little bit of life gain here, but it really all adds up. Can pick off a weenie creature, make your creature big enough to block, and then later on in the game, you throw it on an evasive creature or something like that.
Sure.
All of a sudden, you're swinging the race. So yeah, if you haven't been valuing this card high, I've heard players valuing this as high as the second or third best black
So
summon.
here's a big attack here for Tsumura, but this is a rather predictable final reward here from Shota. He passed the turn with 5 full mana available and a few cards in hand. So Kenji will have certainly been considering that as a possibility. And he does get a nice attack in, though. Again, the Bloodlust Insider, this is the second copy of it that he's played, helping to enable quicker attacks. And Shota finds himself down to 10 life, but is Kenji starting to run out of gas? Shota still with the Vizier of Many Faces on the battlefield. It still has the Cartouche. It is copying a Nimbleblade Kenra. Those of you asking in the chat, I see about the headsets. Those are so that the players can't hear our commentary. We actually do have a live viewing area for Magic fans to come here in Nashville to watch. Oh no, is that Cartouche number 2 for Shota?
Looks like it is.
Oh. Look at that. It takes 2 of them to figure out how much damage and life is going to swing here. This is a big deal for Shota Yasooka as he starts to move closer and closer to stabilizing. And look at this board state all of a sudden. Oop, don't forget the counter on the... There we go. That fervor chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. It does shrink your creature down. Again, it's part of this very red feeling overarching thing in red in this, which is the, give me something now. I'm not really going to worry about later so much.
Yeah, speaking of which, Marshall, Consuming Fervor, it's actually a color-shifted reprint, in a way, of the original alpha card, Unstable Mutation.
Which was blue,
Which was a blue card, and I think this card just fits way better in red.
Totally.
In terms of red being an aggressive color, being willing, to play for the short term at the expense of the long term. And so actually Ethan Fleischer was the designer of this set. He loved Unstable Mutation. When the game first came out, in an Ornithopter Unstable Mutation deck, and he was really kind of burning to just put this card into red.
I can't hear any more of this.
And this was the
that was all I could take.
This was the right set for it because it's the first set in a long time that's used -1/-1 counters at all. So
Really?
this was his one opportunity to get it in there. And I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool.
That is really cool. By the way, you guys have come a long way, in defining the color pie in a more meaningful way to actually how to design cards and which kind of mechanics it comes. I mean, I've heard people ask, would you change a card in Alpha if you could go back? And most of the designers I've talked to have said, no. What do you think?
Well, there's always like the butterfly effect, right? Like obviously Alpha worked out really well in terms of Magic still, surviving and thriving today. So I think a lot of designers are hesitant in that way. But I think, if I were to tweak and change stuff in Alpha, a lot of it was really flavorful and hit from a flavor standpoint. But I think we've come a long way in defining the mechanical aspects of the color pie and the gameplay differences between the colors. And that's kind of where I see that coming in.
Yeah, and you see that with these changes. Consuming Fervor, it's just in a completely different color.
Right.
All right, well, things are starting to look pretty good here for Shota Yasooka as he's starting to chip away, and it feels like Kenji Tsumura is getting to be on his last legs here. Let's see what he's got. Pathmaker Initiate. you know, it's not a bad card, but it doesn't really do much on this battlefield at all.
Yeah, it's a lot better on turn 2 than on turn 8 or whatever we're on right now.
He also doesn't have a reasonable target for it at the moment, as the Emberhorn Minotaur too big, and that Nimbleblade Kenra is going to not be on the battlefield shortly. In the meantime, Shota, content to just keep hitting in with a Pitiless Vizier. He also has multiple cards in hand that he can represent. But as it stands, Kenji wants to make sure he gets something out of that Kenra that's going to die anyway. Oh, boy. Look at this. A Bone Picker now as well for Shota Yasooka. By the way, love Bone Picker. That card's sweet.
Oh, yeah, it's great. Great marriage of flavor and just awesome gameplay functionality, too. And power, frankly. Very powerful card.
It is. Ooh, we get to see another color here from Kenji, so we can see that he does have some black cards in his deck, though he is heavy red, as we discussed at the beginning. But he's got his own copy of Pitiless Vizier. It's a 4-powered 4-drop for him. Perhaps not the best card in his deck, but rounding out that curve for him. And Shota is going to attack for 7 damage here, as Kenji has fallen significantly behind now in this game and is going to have a very difficult time. I mean, if you look, Shota's not even attacking with his creatures with the Cartouche of Ambition on one on each of them. Those have sat back for 4 or 5 turns now.
I will note, though, Kenji's hand looking pretty interesting here. He has a copy of Cartouche of Zeal and Fling, which is a pretty big combination. You know, if he can set that up, say, on the Pitiless Vizier, get in for 5 damage now with the extra point of power from the Cartouche of Zeal, combine that with the Fling, that's 10 damage. But, you know, given the way the board state is and how careful Shota's being with his blockers and his Cartouches of Ambition, it's going to be hard for Kenji to set that up.
Gosh, he could, though.
I mention it mostly as, like, if there's a way where Kenji's going to pull out this game, it's going to involve some kind of sudden combination with Cartouche of Zeal and Fling.
And I'll tell you what, I don't know how much you guys felt this in R&D when you were making it, but this set is terrifying from that perspective.
In terms of the sudden burst damage kind of things?
Shota's sitting at 13, and he probably feels like I'm all right. But, I mean, Kenji can go on-crop crasher, Cartouche of Zeal something, hit you for 10, fling, take 16 in one hit. It's, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah, I think Exert definitely lends itself as a mechanic toward those big swingy turns. It's kind of like there's a fine line between being like hyper aggressive and allowing for aggressive inevitability in a way, if that makes sense. We definitely, because of the presence of Embalm and -1/-1 counters, earlier versions of this set were really prone to stalling out. And so we did want to introduce some ways of kind of pushing through, bursting through to deal a lot of damage and finish down the games. So here's a cycled Vizier of the Tumbling Sands.
This is going to allow Shota to untap something here. And you can see that Kenji is trying to go for a very large chunk of damage with the Cartouche of Zeal and the apparently non-exerted Emberhorn Minotaur.
Fling there actually taking out the blocker, it looks like.
Yep, but Kenji had drawn a Bone Picker for the turn, giving him a really nice mana-efficient turn, though it still feels like he's behind here, as Shota now gets to attack with all of his creatures.
And this representing a lethal attack for Shota Yasooka, forcing Kenji to block and trade Bone Pickers.
Never where this aggressive deck wants to be, in a situation where they're the ones who are facing lethal damage. Got some match updates for you here as well. Things are cruising along very quickly and limited so far. Patrick Dickmann from Germany has won 2-0 over Andrea Mengucci from Italy. That's MTG Bent card for him and Team Eureka for Patrick, as we see Shota Yasooka finish the job here and move himself up to 1-0 against fellow Hall of Famer Kenji Tsumura. Also, Kelvin Chu and Rafael Levy are both tied at a game apiece. We're going to be watching that one shortly. All right, so that's going to do it for game one from our main feature match, but we'll have more live Magic action for you in just a moment. We'll be back right after these messages.
Looking for a place to hang out and play Magic? Head to your local game store this and every Friday to play Friday Night Magic events. Get more info at magic.wizards.com/FNM.
Back to the feature match area here at Pro Tour Amonkhet. We're in Nashville. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Ian Duke, and we're going to go right back to our main table here. Shota Yasooka versus Kenji Tsumura with Shota up a game. We described, one of the play arcs that you'll see sometimes out of these more all-in style aggro decks, which is that sometimes they fade and fizzle and don't quite get there, and they have a hard time coming back from that point. Obviously, Shota Yasooka, it's in his best interest to have that happen as often as possible. And by the way, there's a festering mummy. I was just going to ask you, are there some ways that he can help make that more likely?
Yeah, Festering Mummy is a great example. This has actually come out of the sideboard for Shota Yasooka, so perfect example there of something that's a really useful tool against these aggressive red decks, especially red decks tend to have more fragile creatures, so getting leverage out of those -1/-1 counters. Now, the other key card, and one we saw be really instrumental in Game 1, is Cartouche of Ambition. Just the combination of making your blocker a little bigger, maybe picking off a 1 toughness creature or shrinking something down to size, and then the lifelink especially, just so valuable against these red decks in terms of stabilizing.
Look how good this Festering Mummy looks on
Yeah,
this board.
it's just shutting down everything.
What
Marshall.
in the world? Like, the best Kenji can do is attack with the Nimbleblade Kenra and just trade it off for one of his other 2 creatures. It's like Festering Mummy doing overtime.
Yeah, I think this is a card that's risen in value as sort of a next level answer to these baseline, very powerful red aggressive strategies that a lot of the pros are looking to draft here this weekend. And it's interesting talking to players. You know, it seems like, again, the level 0, level 1 strategy is like try to be aggressive, but then it looks like a lot of players have found ways to actually counteract that and go a level above using cards like Festering Mummy, Cartouche of Ambition, you know, high toughness blockers and things of that nature.
All right, well, this one's almost done. Shota missed a land drop last turn, has missed another one, is now discarding. And even though Kenji has made a not super typical play here, he played the Cartouche of Zeal just on his 1/1 to try to get in there for extra damage. It's going to work, it looks like, because Shota is currently in a stage where he's falling further and further behind on life total and has a very difficult time coming back.
That's right, Marshall. And this is one of the instances where Pathmaker Initiate can be really backbreaking in terms of a control deck trying to stabilize, where if you can get in that early damage, that early 8, 10, 12 points of damage, sometimes a Pathmaker Initiate can just finish the game by itself and is pretty hard to interact with.
Dude, check this out, Ian. Ronus's Monument from Kenji Tsumura. Basically a repeat combat trick for him, allowing him to pile on more damage. And, I mean, you can get the vibe here, right? Like, we're used to aggressive decks and limited having good curves, combat tricks, and some removal spells. But we're talking about any card that allows you to get more damage right now is what players are playing in these aggressive decks, including off-color monuments just for the trigger. I mean, it doesn't affect any card in this deck as far as casting cost goes.
Right. And one cool trick is you can actually combine Ronus's Monument with Pathmaker Initiate. You can give the creature unblockable first, then pump up its power, and it's still going to be unblockable for the rest of the turn. So cool little trick there.
Yeah.
Now, we did see a little bit of a comeback there from Shota in the form of Splendid Agony, just stemming the bleeding a little bit, shrinking, taking out a creature, taking down that Pathmaker Initiate, making blockers a lot more relevant now for Shota. That being said, you know, he's still very low on life total, so he's got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, down to 8. Kenji's still with plenty of cards in hand. How many lands is Kenji playing? Let's take a look. It's not uncommon to see 15 or 16 lands in decks like this. Looks like he's got 16 in this deck. And you can see that he's playing an Emberhorn Minotaur. He's made sure to trigger his Ronus's Monument as well.
Looks like that Minotaur has been exerted
Yeah.
for +1/+1 and Menace, so it's now a 5/4 Menace.
And again, the aggression continues here for Kenji Tsumura, the Hall of Famer, trying to run over his fellow Hall of Famer as quickly as possible while Shota stumbled on mana. So the Kenra, it has Trample. The Emberhorn Minotaur, since it was exerted, has Menace, and you can see a double block here from Shota as Menace demands. What do you have, Shota? Supernatural Stamina there. He's going to want to put that on the creature that was ordered first, it looks like, though I couldn't quite see. Well, this could work out. Looks like he decided to keep the Vizier of Tumbling Sands, which does act as a removal spell for him. And whoa, is this a nice little comeback coming here? Shota hit some land drops. He's got a Shadowstorm Vizier, but he's all of a sudden stabilized reasonably. Now, he is at 5 facing down Nimbleblade Kenra and that Monument, so this could get out of hand still. Another Kenra hits the battlefield, but of course, the original now has 3 power.
And Shota has to be pretty scared of a combat trick at this point, or
He
really
does.
any kind of instant, because that Nimbleblade Kenra does have prowess as well.
Let's see if Shota can maybe cycle or discard here to try to keep that Shadowstorm Vizier alive rather than just a chump block. Yeah, he's got another Vizier of Tumbling Sands. Kind of comboing off here. And he says, sure. Okay, they bounce off each other. Ooh, and he manages to take 0 damage for that attack. Now, his problems are not solved, right? He's facing down 2 creatures and the monument. Every creature that Kenji plays for the rest of the game represents a pump spell effectively. And Shota still doesn't have amazing board state yet with just the Shadowstorm Vizier and the Vizier of Tumbling Sand. So he's got work to do, but I gotta say, he's still in this. Oh, well, taking a look at Kenji Tsumura's hand makes me feel less confident about how in this Shota Yasooka actually is. You can see a combination of both brute strength and fling, which is lethal. And there's even a swamp off the top there for Kenji in case he finds any of his, well, I'm not going to call them splash cards. He's running 5 swamps in the deck, but much lesser.
And interesting to note, last turn during combat, Kenji could have cast Brute Strength to kind of force his way through that blocker and get a little bit of damage in. But I think he actually wants to just go ahead and save that Brute Strength to combine with the Fling.
Mm-hmm. I mean, all he has to do is wait for Shota to put his shields down enough. In fact, this might be the moment now for Kenji Tsumura.
That's right. With that blue mana tapped, Kenji not needing to fear cancel or
Here we go.
the sort anymore.
Yeah, Magma Spray's not going to get the job done against Nimbleblade Kenra. Remember, it has prowess as well, so this is effectively +4. Comes in with 1 power, that's 5. And all you got to do is just throw it at his face, and that's exactly what he does. So Kenji Tsumura evens things up against Shota Yasooka. Again, Kenji leveraging some pretty cool stuff there, right? He had a quick start, cheap creatures piled on damage while Shota was shields down with his mana issues. But the really neat thing is that he found a lot of ways to chip in damage, right? We saw him use a Pathmaker Initiate to get in some damage there. We saw him use Ronus's Monument to get in a little extra damage. And then we saw a combination of 2 cards, one of them being Fling, the other being Brute Strength, to finish the game off there. Those were all, non-traditional ways, right? I mean, usually you're thinking about turning your creature sideways, maybe using a combat trick or so. Here, he was kind of being a little tricky with it too.
Mm-hmm. I also like the strategic use of Exert there, giving his creature menace, but also chipping in with a smaller creature at the same time, knowing Shota was almost forced to block.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, that puts us on our back table. We get a little live look in here at Raph Levy versus Kelvin Chu.
So Kelvin, it looks like, is on a red-green deck, pretty traditional beatdown, with some Exert, some removal spells. He's got a copy of Glorybringer, I see here, one of the absolute best rares in the format, if not the best rare.
Yeah, that's a beauty. Kelvin Chu, fresh off of a GP victory just last weekend, riding the wave. See if he can run it up here. He's already up 1-0. He plays for a Team MTG main card.
Raphael Levy also playing red-green here, so a red-green mirror match between these two players. This is likely to come down to a lot about tempo and who can take the aggressive stance here. Because red and green are both central Exert colors, they're going to operate much better when they are on the aggressiveness, on the attack, rather.
Prowling Serpapard there for Kelvin. Also, if you note that the clock changed a little in the middle, we did have these players held for a little while, and that change reflects the extra time that they've received. Oh no. Is this Raph just discarding the hand size here?
It looks like it just stalled on 2 lands.
Wow, a Prowling Serpapard is going to take big chunks of life total away until Raph can get stabilized there, and this one could be over pretty quickly if he's not careful.
Raph needs a land this turn.
He hit it.
He hit it.
Let's see what he can do to start stabilizing. There's many cards he can have that trade quite happily for a Prowling Serpapard. There's one of them. Trial of Strength will get him a 4/2 Beast. Kelvin actually has a play on his end step here. He's got a Pouncing Cheetah, so he's got 7 power on the board and may just want to trade off. Any removal spell here for Kelvin would be pretty good, though. He's only on Forests, and so he's just going to trade. Still piling on damage, though. Knocks Raph down to 13 and really has him on his heels. It's Kelvin's job to now capitalize on the stumble from Raph. And, you know, I'm a big fan of Shafet Monitor. Cool card, but that is not a big swinging board state play for him to cycle a Shafet Monitor. It's a good value play, but this could be a window for Raph Levy to start really stabilizing, particularly if he can find another land off the top.
Yeah, the real question in my mind is, did Kelvin cycle that because he's actively trying to ramp into something, or is it just the only thing that he was able to do that turn with his mana?
Looks like I spoke a little too soon, didn't I? He had not only the untapped land from the Shafet Monitor, but also a land out of his hand to play a Blood Rage Brawler. So instead of just cycling a Shafet Monitor, he actually just added 4 power to his board. It's a pretty good turn.
Not bad.
Yeah, Raph probably felt a little relief when he saw that thing get cycled, and then it was like, oh no. Blood Rage Brawler. An absolute beating at 2 mana. 4/3 significantly above the curve as far as what you would expect from even an aggressive 2 mana creature. But oh boy, he makes you pay the price, discarding a card. You can see that Kelvin discarded a real card too. He just discarded an Ornery Kudu. You know, it's a meaningful spell in a game like this. Okay, giant spider there for Raph Levy. The shields, they are going up. Oh, but there's Glory Bringer for Kelvin Chu. How far does this advantage bar go? Because that is nasty. That is it's one of the top 3 rares in the set, and that probably will seal the deal on the game. A land off the top for Raph Levy. Maybe he's got something going. Let's take a look at his hand. Aggression, 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 a fling. Yeah, his deck really designed to be the curve out deck in this mirror match. And Kelvin Chu is able to just punish Raph for having missed that land. Remember, this is game 3 as well. They're both got a game apiece. Really tough one for Raph to have just missed a step and just get smashed like this because his hand is great.
Yeah, I really think this could have been a much different game had Raph not stalled on lands on turn 2.
Yeah.
You know, Glory Bringer is tough to beat, but I actually think, Raphael's hand is reasonably posed to actually have beat a Glory Bringer here, even if he had to fling a 4/2 Beast or something like that.
Yeah.
But just not coming up with enough speed to really stay ahead of the game here.
Yeah, he goes ahead and makes the fling play here, but he's also just dead on board. So Kelvin Chu is going to be 2-0, continuing his winning ways after the weekend, and also showing a little further his expertise in this format. So great stuff from him. And he's going to take that match down. Tough one for Raph. I mean, Raph's been playing forever, so we're not. But that's just still a tough pill to swallow. You make it to the Pro Tour, you stumble once. He recovered. He went land, but it's just way too late.
At least he got his Mana Screw game and his Glory Bringer beatdown game out of the way at the same time. It's always good to double up on your bad luck.
Oh, is that how that works?
Depending on how you're keeping track.
All right, fair enough. All right, that leaves us with but one game to play. Our main match has Kenji Tsumura and Shota Yasooka faced off against each other in really polar opposite decks. One of them being a blue-black. Usually you will see cycling deck. This doesn't seem to be that so much. It has a cycling sub-theme to it, but it's really a blue-black control deck in the hands of Shota Yasooka. And, of course, Kenji Tsumura on a heavy red, heavy aggro deck. Kenji's going to attack with that Bloodlust Insider. And Shota's going to decline to trade here. Yes, it wouldn't be bad to just get that Insider off the table, but when Shota looks at it, he says, wait, if you play something else and give it haste, I can block that and still kill your Bloodlust Insider anyway. So he's going to keep it around. And Shota's going to pass the turn back. This is an interesting one. He certainly seems like he might have Splendid Agony in his hand. Let's take a look and see what he's actually got going on. Hey, there it is. He also had the option to go for Cartouche of Ambition, though. This little 1/1's not the best target for it. He'd prefer to wait a little longer if he can. And he's got something very powerful to do. Here's Honed Khopesh now for Kenji Tsumura, who's looking to equip it up. And this is going to force the issue. Ooh, Shota says, okay. This works out well, though, for Shota. He can still use his Splendid Agony to his benefit. He can block the Battlefield Scavenger there, put a counter on each creature, and then put the last counter on the Scavenger. Ah! Kenji, though, he knows what's up. He's going to play a Cartouche of Zeal on it before all of this, and that's going to take that line of play away from Shota Yasooka and make him augment it.
And that was a really heads-up play that he played and equipped the Honed Khopesh before playing the Cartouche of Zeal, ensuring that he wouldn't get blown out by a Splendid Agony in response.
Totally. Really smart stuff there from Kenji Tsumura, eking out every bit of damage, and you do have to. Shota's going to immediately attack because he's got a 4-drop to play. What is he going to do?
Yeah, we did see a Pitiless Vizier in Shota's hand, and sure enough, it does come out here. And I actually like, based on what we saw from Shota's hand, I like his chances in this game. He's got a good collection of defensive cards that are really going to be useful in this matchup here, particularly that Cartouche of Ambition. If he can get that to stick on the Pitiless Vizier, that's going to represent a huge life swing each turn.
Hey, the door's open right now for him to do that if he wants to make that play. Now, he doesn't get a huge swing from the -1/-1 counter, but the attack that he gets to make is... You know, Kenji can't just sit there and take hits from a 5-mana lifelinker. He may even be forced to just trade off if Shota were to go to that for that play. The other option Shota has, very powerful, if slow spell. He's got a Trial of Knowledge, and that's what he's going to play. He just couldn't resist it. Draw 3, discard 1. Really powerful card, gets you to what you want, but Kenji, you know, that's the kind of card that he can really punish you for playing. Shota's going to attack for 4, play a land, and pass the turn back to Kenji Tsumura.
Now, it's actually a bit of a shame. If Shota had had a 5th land in his hand that turn before casting the Trial, he could have actually cast Cartouche of Ambition and gotten an attack safely with the Pitiless Vizier, because if Kenji were to block with his Emberhorn Minotaur, Shota would be able to have 2 mana up to cycle and give it indestructible.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's take a look at what Shota is working with here, because his hand, as you mentioned a minute ago, Ian, looks pretty darn good. Wasteland Scorpion, if it ever gets a chance to block, is going to trade for most of the stuff that Kenji puts out. Lay Bare the Heart can take away some of that kind of combo potential that we saw. You know, the fling plus combat trick, that kind of thing, to just get Shota dead if his life total does get low. And as we talked about before, Cartouche of Ambition can absolutely break this wide open for him. If he can resolve that on a big creature and get even 1 or 2 hits, it can put the game out of reach from Tsumura's standpoint. Okay, Kenji's lining up a big attack. Is he going to exert the Minotaur? It looks like he's hovering his hand, and he's like, yeah, yep, I'm going to exert it. And what that means is, interestingly, even though it's the Minotaur that's being exerted, the Battlefield Scavenger actually has the ability that it affects whenever you exert a creature. So he actually gets to do what we call a rummage there. You discard a card and draw a card. And he had an additional mountain in his hand, so he did go ahead and do that. Finally, the Festering Mummy got a chance to jump in front and block something. Shota could not do that quickly enough. He is down to 11 life, so things are not in any way locked up. But he's got a lot of tools to work with in his hand.
Yeah, I'd love to see Shota go for the Cartouche of Ambition this turn. The only thing he would need to fear would be a Splendid Agony from Kenji's side, but he hasn't seen that card yet.
And he went for it, and this makes a lot of sense. And it looks like he's actually just passed the turn back here. He wanted to leave up supernatural stamina.
Now, the other thing he has is a Vizier of Tumbling Sands also in his hand. So you could cycle that and untap the Pitiless Vizier at any point.
Oh, my God.
Making a 5/3 lifelink indestructible blocker all of a sudden. That seems pretty good to me, Marshall.
What the heck? Is interesting to note here, by the way, Shota may have missed a trigger. I see he's got the Trial of Knowledge still on the battlefield, but he did just cast Cartouche of Ambition. And, you know, Trial of Knowledge does not care which cartouche you cast or which one enters the battlefield, but when it does, you get to pick that card up and you can recast it later, and he didn't do that.
Yeah, interesting. He may have just missed the trigger there.
I think it was just an oversight.
Yeah, it could normally be a very costly mistake, but, I mean, even with that, I like Shota's position here a lot, the way he's been maneuvering this game. And if Kenji can't find an answer to that 5-power lifelinker, very soon he's going to be hurting.
He is. He's got a Manticore of the Gauntlet here. Shota's going to want to play that Lay Bare the Heart. You know, he's got to start thinking about, well, how can I lose this game? Right? And it is to some crazy combo, although that connection there with the Pitiless Vizier is going to make it very difficult. Very, very difficult for Kenji to win now. I think that's a Limits of Solidarity, actually, that he took away. Which is another, again, you know, I keep talking about the scary nature of playing against this red deck. That's another one, you know, we call that a threaten effect, you know, lets you steal your opponent's creature for the turn. And of course, that's a way that you can easily lose the game of Magic, is a blocker disappears on your side and becomes an attacker on theirs. Looks like a Pitiless Vizier for Kenji Tsumura again, but this one's starting to really slip away from him as Shota has been able to leverage lifelink to his advantage in a pretty big way. In we go again, says Shota. Now Kenji's starting to consider blocks. Kenji hardly even made the gesture to block, and Shota just snapped off, cycling away his Wasteland Scorpion to give his Pitiless Vizier indestructible until the end of turn, let it survive, let him gain even more life while taking a key threat off the battlefield from Kenji. And this one almost in the books here for Shota Yasooka, though he does still have to find a way to finish. One of the other things that I've seen people do is use Limits of Solidarity in conjunction with Fling. It's a nice one. Steal your creature. You'll probably get it back, right? Sometimes not. Curse Minotaur there for Shota. Take a look at one of the two Hall of Famers here in this match, as he is undoubtedly pondering what's left in his library and what a line to victory could possibly look like. It is not a straight line in this case, but his deck is capable of piling on huge amounts of damage in just a swing or two. The Vizier starts off by attacking. No blocks. An answer for the... Oh, he's going to go for Deem Worthy. Is it going to work? And it actually worked. And that's because Shota Yasooka had lethal in hand. So what he did is he attacked with his Menace creature. It couldn't be blocked in that scenario. And since he had a spell that bumped its power by 2 or more, That's enough for 5. And Shota Yasooka defeats Kenji Tsumura 2-1 in that battle of the Hall of Famers there. And welcome back to the booth here in Nashville. That's Ian Duke. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. It is our pleasure and honor to bring you coverage here from the Pro Tour. We're just getting rolling here. That was round number 2. We're going to be bringing you one more round of draft today, and then, of course, 5 rounds of standard. Lots of exciting stuff to happen in Constructed a little later in the day. But for now, we're going to get a chance to take a look at some of the 3-0 decks. Anything standing out to you, Ian, from Limited?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about, how aggressive a lot of players think the format is and how everyone's trying to go for these red decks. But actually, in our first 2 drafts that we watched, our first 2 rounds, we actually saw more of a controlling blue deck actually take the matches, which is pretty interesting to me. It may indicate that, the initial impressions of the format, that there's actually levels to go above that to counter those aggressive strategies if you put in the effort to learn how to build those slower decks.
Yeah, and that is the real question, right? What are the tools that are out there? If people have identified a very aggressive deck as being the best deck, well, those are usually fragile strategies, right? Those aren't the kind of things that just work consistently all the time and they just have a bunch of resiliency and redundancy built into them. Oftentimes, if you kind of knock them off a little bit or make them stumble, you can do that. But of course, you need the tools to do that, and that's what players are going to be looking for here. All right, that is going to do it for round 2 coverage. We'll be back with more, though, right after these messages.
So between you and me, I didn't actually know that Genesis was a boy band. But if you look at this picture, I think you'll agree that's clearly what's going on here. This is Team Genesis. Brad Nelson, Lucas Blahan, Seth Manfield, Mike Majors, Martin Dang, and Martin Muller, looking very, very nice there at the last PT. Now, how did they do there? Well, they're in 11th place in the team series standings right now with 35 points. Remember, the top of the standings, 49, the very low end, round about the late teens. There are a couple of people on 15, but basically 17, 18, 19 is the low end. So well above average, in 11th place out of 32 teams, and well within range with still 2 PTs to go. So how are they doing here today? Lucas Blahon is 1-1. He lost to Kazuhiro Kamata of Japan in that round. Mike Majors is still locked in battle. He's one of the last matches of the round against Mike Sigrist. Seth Manfield is up to 2-0. Martin Muller's 2-0. Brad Nelson is 2-0, beating Alain Bardini of France. And Martin Dang, he's up against one of the success stories of the last PT, Sam Vuillo of the Magic Corsairs crew. All of them, the French players, 3 of them left at this PT, so he's still playing. But BDM is down on the floor. He's with one of the members of Team Genesis, and I believe it's a former world champion.
Thanks, Rich. It is. I'm here with Seth Manfield. Seth, I'm going to ask you a question. Or I was going to ask you a question. Rich said something about Genesis being a band, and I was going to say if you were Peter Gabriel Genesis or Phil Collins Genesis, but you actually have no idea who Genesis is, correct?
Not really. That was not part of our decision process for making this team name. We made it based on it's the first of the team series, and that was kind of how we decided on Genesis.
All right, now, great team here. Everyone seems to be doing pretty well. 11th place finish after the first event in the team series. How do you guys feel you guys did, and where do you need to go to move up in the standings?
Of course, we would love to have one player in top 8. I think that's going to be a huge boost of points. But right now, we've all started out, most of us have started out strong. So I think if we have a lot of X5s, maybe X4s, like that's really where we want to be. You have to get lucky in order to top 8 these. So you can't really go in expecting to top 8. But if we have someone break through and then some solid finishes, like 11th place, it's just after one Pro Tour, so we still got this one, the next one. So I think we did fine at the last one, and we can improve upon that for this one.
Okay, now I know you guys got to do all of your play testing and preparing by car, essentially, for this event. Usually a lot of flying involved in Pro Tours, but you guys were able to stay kind of geographically tight around this area?
Yeah, so we've got basically half the team is Europeans, but then most of the Americans live in Roanoke. So that's Michael Majors and Brad Nelson are there, as well as a couple other people we were testing with. So I was pretty happy to just drive there. Then we drive to the Grand Prix in Richmond, drive to Nashville. So really no flying at all. So I was happy for this Pro Tour to just kind of stay close to home.
Now, Roanoke, great place to be if you're going to be playtesting standard, a great group of people to be playtesting standard with. I think a lot of people, we see you guys, you top-level players in this game, and always calm, always relaxed. But, as we get closer to that first round of standard, do you get nervous? Do you worry that you got the format right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I was really undecided on what standard deck to play. That's kind of how I am. Like, I'll make my decision at the last minute. I'm never confident until I've at least gotten a round or two under my belt, seen what other teams are playing. Because sometimes there's this deck where, oh no, they showed up with that. Like, we didn't test against that at all, and that's just a terrible matchup for us. And so, like, that's obviously my worst fear. It's happened before. It might happen again. So I'm very wary about standard. So I'm going to wait and see before making a judgment call on that.
All right, Seth Manfield, good luck. Let's hope you got the format right and that you don't play too many, oh no, I wasn't expecting that in this tournament. Seth Manfield, Brian David Marshall, sending it back to the news desk.
Well, Seth said that they'd started out strong. They had, while that interview was taking place. Those last 2 results of the round went live for Team Genesis, and Mike Majors defeated Mike Sigrist to advance to 2-0. And then also Martin Dang got underway with a win over Sam Vuillo of France. So Magic Corsairs crew 0-2, but Martin Dang for Genesis 1-1. So after 2 rounds, they've played 12 matches. They've won 10 of them. Genesis doing very nicely, thank you. Can't really complain, averaging out 5-1 over the first couple of rounds. Remember, 1 round of limited to go, and then we head into standard this afternoon. But we've got another new limited feature for you, and we wanted again to show you this idea of how a draft deck is built, pick by pick, sort of like the great sports teams of old, as you gradually build it from year to year. In this case, from pick to pick to pick. And we're going to show you how the draft deck was built for Ben Friedman he's in the company of Luis Scott Vargas.